Hi and welcome to the install video for our Rock Runner series rear bumper for the 3rd gen Toyota Tacoma. So we're going to start by doing an overview of all the parts you're going to receive with your rear bumper when you get it. First off, we have the bumper center, hitch receiver, bedside fill plates. Then over here we have your bumper sides. Now today the install we're doing, we're using the single tube sloped sides for the bumper. However, you'll be receiving whichever sides you ordered for your rear bumper. You'll get a pair of bumper side support tubes and then 2 pairs of bedside supports depending on whether your fenders are cut or not. Over here we have rear license plate mount. It's a flip up mount for the rear bumper, S1 reverse light mounting brackets, and your license plate light and associated hardware packs to get everything assembled. So the bumper center that we're using for today's install has our Rock Runner logo tack welded right onto it, but the one that you guys will be receiving is going to have a separate laser cut Rock Runner logo, which you'll need to install with 3 of the provided screws and nuts. Also, another thing just to note, right here we have everything is raw steel. Before you install your bumper, you're going to want to make sure that you paint or get everything powder coated before you assemble and put it on your vehicle. So the first thing we're going to start with assembling into the bumper, if you're going to use aftermarket reverse lights, the Baja Designs S1, we provide a pair of brackets that will allow you to mount those lights properly in the bumper. So you'll want to take this bracket and replace the one that comes with the light, install this bracket onto the light, but you want to make sure that the angled back portion of the bracket goes towards the back of the light. So your lens and front face of the light would be that direction. So you can go ahead and install this bracket onto your light first, and then you'll need to take and put your light and bracket right into the bumper right here. There's a square hole you can see on top of the bumper. You're going to use the provided 5/16 carriage head bolt and then flat washer and flange nut on the inside to attach your S1 right to the rear bumper. So the next thing we want to install onto the rear bumper is the flip up license plate mount. So you're going to want to grab the piece with the slotted holes on it, and you're going to take these bent flanges pointing up, and that's going to attach right to the bumper using 5/16 button head bolt and a flat washer. Next, we're going to grab the part that the license plate actually attaches to, and we're going to attach that to our mounting bracket here. So we want to flip this over. These will fit inside this flange here. So we're going to hold it inside, and then we're going to grab 5/16 button head with a flat washer. We're going to put that in from the outside, and then we also need to take one of these nylon washers and put it in between. Then on the inside, we'll use another flat washer and the 1/4 or the 5/16 nylon lock nut. And you want to do the same thing over on this side. Now those nylon washers do fit pretty tight in between there. That's fine, totally normal. We actually want to we use those washers to put a little bit of pressure on this bracket so that it doesn't move easily, because we don't want it bouncing around when it's attached. So you can go ahead and tighten these nuts just to get them enough tension on them so that the license plate will flip up and down, but that it won't actually move up on its own without you doing it manually. Next, we're going to install our license plate light mount. So you're just going to use this flat bracket here. This light that comes in the package has these machine like sheet metal screws pre-installed. We don't want to use those. Those are not the correct screws. We send some replacement 1024s to mount that light to the bracket. So you want to make sure you run your wires through the center hole in the bracket first. So once you have your wires pulled through the bottom of the bracket there, you want to use the 1024 oval head screws that we provide with the hardware kit to put those through and mount the light to the bracket. Now those get a washer, flat washer, and then the nylon lock nut on the back side. So we got our screws all tightened down. You want to tighten them just enough to kind of put a little pressure on this foam gasket that's on the back of the light. You don't need to over tighten them because it'll just squeeze that foam right out of there. So next thing, we need to take the license plate mounting plate, and we're going to hold this up to our flip up plate here, and then take the license plate, and that goes on next. So you're going to use 1/4 inch button head bolt, flat washer, go through your license plate, and then through the license plate light mounting bracket, and then the flip up bracket. Once we have those in, we're going to flip up our license plate mount and put the 1/4 inch flat washers and nylon locking nuts on the back. All right, now that we have our license plate all tightened down and installed on the bracket, you can see that we have a pretty good amount of tension on these bolts that go through the side of our flip-up bracket. That's a good thing. You want to have just enough on there so that that license plate stays down on its own. And then if you need to flip it up to attach, put in a receiver, the license plate will stay up on its own. So that completes everything for our bumper center preparation. Now we'll do wiring once the bumper is actually installed onto the truck, so don't worry about doing anything with that right now. Next, we're going to move on to showing you how to remove your OE bumper so that we can continue with the install. All right, so the first thing you're going to want to do getting started with this rear bumper install, you're going to want to go ahead and remove your factory spare tire. So grab your toolkit, get that lowered down and remove that completely from the truck. That'll give you room to get in there and access the bolts easier for the rear bumper. After that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to lift our truck up on the lift, get underneath, and start showing you which bolts we need to remove to get the bumper off. So we're actually going to start first by disconnecting a couple of wiring connectors first, and then we'll show you which bolts we need to take out. So underneath the truck here, we have this big plug for the trailer wiring connection. We're going to squeeze down on the top and pull this plug off. Right here, we need to disconnect this one, squeeze the bottom of this tab, and wiggle that one out. And then this truck is not equipped with it, but if yours has blind spot monitors and park sensors, you will also need to disconnect that plug as well. Right, now we can move on to removing the bolts that will allow the bumper to come off the truck. So there are 5 on each side. These guys right here, those are all going to use a 17mm wrench or socket. You'll need to remove all 5 of those from each side, and then the whole bumper and hitch assembly and everything will come off the back of the truck. All right, so we've removed all 5 of our bolts from each side, and you can see the bumper is still actually staying on the truck. There's a little safety pin on the receiver right here. There's one on each side, so you kind of have to actually lift the bumper up and then slide it back to get it off the frame of the truck. There it goes. All right, we have the whole bumper assembly off the back of our truck. With our Rock Runner series rear bumpers, they don't provide, we don't offer any provisions for sensors of any kind, so you don't need this wiring harness or anything at all from this rear bumper except the trailer wiring plug. So we're going to go ahead and pull that out from the bumper here. All you have to do is squeeze these metal tabs towards each other, pull this entire assembly out of the bumper. That is the only piece we're going to reuse from this whole thing. Next, we need to remove these little L brackets that support the receiver hitch from the bottom of the frame. We're going to take those off because our new replacement receiver hitch is going to go and pinch in between those later on. So the next thing we're going to do is remove these little plastic covers from below the taillights. So there are three little plastic pins that we need to remove. So just use a small flat blade screwdriver to pop the head off of that pin. There's one there, one here, which is broken on this side already. And then the third one, we need to drop the tailgate to access that one. So that one's going to be right up in the top here. There we go. Then you can take this whole plastic piece off of each side. The next step, we need to do a little bit of cutting on the truck. So we're going to just draw a line around the corner of this seam down here to get started. We're basically going to be cutting straight across here, right about flush with this rolled piece of sheet metal under here. So it's easier to start cutting a little bit below that, and you can cut higher if you need to or sand it up higher. We just don't want to gouge into this material. So I'm basically drawing a line to follow right about just below that, all the way out across this piece here. Then we're going to go around the corner and then draw it straight across here. We're going to go out to this rounded corner here and cut down that line right now and just remove this piece. I got this piece all cut out. You just want to make sure that as you're cutting, just pay attention that you don't cut up too high and gouge into this part of the body. You don't want to cut that out. So it's good to keep an eye on it, maybe from the back, take a look every once in a while, make sure you aren't cutting too high. So next thing we need to do is take a measurement and make a mark so we can do one more cut here. So we're going to take a measurement from the bottom of the taillight here, and we're going to go down to 4 7/8 of an inch, which is right here. You can see we already have an angled line drawn here, so you basically want to go from that 4 7/8 and draw an angled line right down to this bottom corner here, and we're going to take our cutoff wheel and cut that at an angle and remove this piece. So we've completed our last little angled cut there, remove that small piece under the taillight. Now you're going to want to repeat the process on the other side of the truck. All right, the next thing we're going to show you guys is how to measure and mark properly on the bed side so that we can go ahead and cut it and get it ready to install the bumper. So we've got our tape measure here. I'm going to show you real quick what our reference points are. So we're going to take the top of our tape measure, put it right up against the plastic cap here on the top of the bedside, and we want to pull the tape measure straight down, let it kind of curve around the bedside with the natural curve of the body, and then we're going to go down and make a mark at 23.5 inches. So we're going to make that mark right on this little seam on the body line here is where you're going to put that mark. The next one we're going to do, same thing, we're going to put our tape measure right up to the plastic cap here and curve the tape measure around the body, and we're going to go down to 25 7/8 of an inch, right where it contacts the edge of the flare. So when you're holding that tape measure, you want to make sure that you keep your tape measure nice and perpendicular to the top of the bed. So don't have your tape measure, sideways or crooked or anything. Make sure it's a nice 90 degrees from the top of the bed straight down to where you need to make your mark on the bedside. Okay. So after you have those two marks put on the bedside here. We like to go ahead and connect those with just a skinny piece of masking tape, so you have a nice straight line all the way across from mark to mark. And then out here, this is going to vary for some people depending on if you have your fender flares cut or not. That's why we made our reference point right here. So if your flares are not cut, you can just kind of extend that line around the corner with the tape. For you guys that have your flares cut back pretty far, obviously it's pretty easy just to continue another inch or so on your bedside cut there. Before we go ahead and cut into the bedside here, we're going to remove the bedside support bracket that's back here behind this plastic fender liner. We're going to be cutting out basically the entire thing anyway, so it's easier just to take it out right now. So we're going to use a 10mm socket, take these 3 screws out of the flare here. So we actually have to pull the flare away a little bit and get these 2 screws out right here behind the flare. Need to pop this little plastic plug out right here. Just kind of pull that through. Then there's 2 more screws inside here. Now this whole bracket should come right out from the back. You want to make sure you save these 2 screws that you took out. We'll need to reuse those later. All right, we're ready to cut here. So I'm going to use a 4.5-inch angle grinder, which is with a cutoff wheel on there. And just remember that we're cutting on the top of our tape line. I put arrows there just to reference which side of that tape we're cutting on. I'm going to start by where we left off with our last cut here, follow that around and line up with our tape and go all the way around the side. So as you come around the flare here, we want to cut all the way through the flare and the bedside behind it. And then this inner plastic fender is still going to be connected. So I usually just cut around the corner and go right through that plastic liner, and this whole piece will come off. All right, next up we're going to show you guys how to install the bedside support bracket. Since we removed that one in the other step, the bedside is now really loose. So we send these brackets with the bumper. There's one for each side. So the one for the driver's side, you're going to want to hold it up, and it'll have this little short leg will be pointing towards the back of the truck, and then you can see that it slopes in a little bit at the bottom down here too. So that's the one for the driver's side. I'm going to use the 2 original screws that we took out from the bed up here, and we're going to loosely bolt this in place. So we'll hold this up underneath here and thread our original screws back into these 2 holes. So we have these 2 screws loosely installed. We're going to take this end of the bracket and we're going to lift it up and kind of push it up against the back of this plastic clip that's in the body here. So kind of push it against that. The bracket is slotted on this side so it can move in and out depending on where you want your bedside adjusted. For now, I'm just going to push it all the way out that direction, and then I'm going to tighten down these 2 screws. So I'm going to take this bracket and just kind of push it forward towards the front of the truck until it rests against that plastic flare clip that's there. And then I'm going to go ahead and drill a 1/4 inch hole right through the bedside here. Now I've already disconnected the flare from the outside. I've undone the clips here so that that's loose. We want to make sure that the drill bit does not go through the fender flare. We only want to drill through the steel bedside. So I'm going to go ahead and bolt our bedside support bracket to the bedside here. So I'm using the 1/4 by 1/2 inch bolt with 1/4 inch flat washer and then the 1/4 nylock nut on the inside. So I'm going to put my flat washer on the bolt. We're going to pull the flare away here, and then we're going to put this bolt in underneath the flare up here. Going into our bracket behind there with our 1/4 inch nylock nut on the inside. So you can go ahead and tighten that hardware down to hold that in place. And then later on, since these are slotted, you can loosen these screws and you can adjust that whole bedside in or out depending on how you'd like it to line up with the bumper once you get it installed. One thing you also want to make sure that you do before you put the bumper on or proceed any farther, you want to make sure you clean up any sharp edges on the back of this sheet metal from the cutting. It tends to get a lot of really sharp spots on the back here that can easily cut your fingers open. So get in there with a sander or whatever you'd like to use to clean that up and get it nice and smooth. And then you'll want to paint the bottom edge of this sheet metal as well. If you don't paint it, you know, it'll rust, of course. And then we personally do not put any rubber edge trim along the bottom of that. You can if you wish to. We don't do it, however, because all that does is just hold water and dirt and stuff in there and create a space for rust. So totally up to the customer if you'd like to do that though. All right, so next thing we're going to do is get ready to install our bedside fill plates here. First thing we have to do for that is we have to replace this one M6 bolt here that's in the body. We provide a longer one that's about 1 inch long. It's an M6 by 25. So you're going to want to take this one out and replace it. So use 10mm socket. Remove that one, you won't need it anymore. Then we're going to put 1/4 inch flat washer on our M6 bolt here and thread it back into that hole. So we're going to grab our driver's side bedside corner here that needs to get installed under the taillight here. So of course you're going to get a pair of these with your rear bumper. You can tell the difference between them. They can only fit one way, of course, but also a quick reference is that the passenger side one has this really skinny flange on the top of that mounting tab, and this driver's side one is a lot thicker. So we're going to grab this driver's side one. We're going to use this notch to line up against that longer bolt we put in. We're not going to add any hardware right now. We're basically just going to set it on that bolt, and we're going to hold this into position and get it to where we have it aligned real nicely. So we're looking for an even gap under the tail light, typically somewhere around 1/2 inch all the way around. We want to make sure that it lines up nicely with this bedside panel here, and that the edge of this is about flush with this little rolled seam here. So typically you don't want it sticking out too far like that or in too far, because if it goes in too far, there's not enough material here to put the upper mounting bolt in. So get this right about here, nice and even, flush out here. Take a look underneath and you want to make sure, it's going to be hard to see on the camera, but we want to make sure that all the way up in the top here where that top screw goes in, that you have enough material to drill through and add your 1/4 inch bolt right up here where my finger's at. So with that held in place, you want to grab permanent marker, reach up inside here, and we're going to go ahead and mark that top hole first, the center of where we need to drill, since that one's more critical because there isn't a whole lot of material there. So we're going to go ahead and drill a 1/4 inch hole right here first. All right, so I have my bedside corner here, and I have 1/4 by 1/2 inch bolt, 1/4 inch flat washer, and then a 1/4 inch nylock nut. We're going to go ahead and put the 1/4" bolt without a washer. We want to put it on the inside of the bedside corner there first, and then we're going to put it through the hole that we just drilled here. Then we'll put our flat washer and nylock nut on the back side. Now that that upper 1/4" bolt is loosely installed, we're just going to hold our corner in place again here, have it all nice, aligned with an even gap how we want it when it's finished, and we're going to go ahead and mark our lower hole here for the next hole we have to drill. Alright, so you can see I've made a mark for our lower hole here. We're going to drill another 1/4" hole right through the bedside here. Alright, so both of our holes are drilled. You want to clean up any metal burrs on the back side of those holes, and then you can paint this area if you'd like to. Sometimes we paint this whole area black right behind that bedside corner, because typically that bedside corner is going to be powder coated black, and it kind of looks nice to have it match behind there all black, but that's totally up to you. It's not necessary. Now that our holes and everything are done, we're going to show you how to do the final install of the bedside corner. So we're going to go ahead and get this bedside corner installed, get it all adjusted and tightened down. So I have the 2 1/4" by 1/2" bolts already pre-installed in here. I'm going to put those through the holes that we drilled. Then we're going to put the flat washer and the nylock nut on the back side. Now you don't want to tighten these down just yet. Just put the washer and nut onto both of them and just kind of spin them on finger tight so we have the ability to move this in and out. So we have some additional 1/4" flat washers here that we're going to use just as shims to adjust and get the correct spacing behind this bracket here. So the reason we left these bolts loose out here is we can kind of pull this bedside corner out, and then we'll be able to put washers on this M6 bolt as spacers so that we can get the correct depth there before we tighten this down. So I'm going to start with 3 washers, and I think that's going to get us about where we need to be. Also, if you need to do any other adjustments other than the washers, you can bend this little tab by hand a little bit. If you want to grab it, you can kind of force it over to get a little bit of adjustment and get the right depth that you want there too. So I'm going to go ahead and try those 3 washers, see how that looks. Put another washer on the outside, and then the M6 nut that we provided earlier, that's going to thread right onto this M6 bolt that we swapped out. So I'll go ahead and get everything kind of adjusted for one final time so it looks even. Tighten down your hardware. Alright, so to install your passenger side bedside corner, the process is pretty much the same. There's just a little bit different hardware here. We're going to take this nut off of the hinge bracket over on this side. That's a 14mm socket. You don't quite have to take it off all the way, just enough to be able to slide your bedside corner in between there. So the process is essentially going to be the same. You'll just put this slotted tab onto that stud where we just loosen the nut, and then you're going to want to go ahead and adjust this bedside piece just the same as the other side. Get your even reveal and gap, drill your holes, and get everything prepped there. And then once you're ready to tighten everything down, we do provide some additional 3/8 flat washers that you can use in here as shims to get the proper adjustment for your bedside corner. The next thing you're going to want to install is the hitch receiver. So we've already taken the whole receiver and set it up in place here, just kind of put some pressure on it against the bottom of the frame with this jack just to hold it in place. So it's going to line up with the original holes that are in the frame here, where your the original hitch receiver came out with these little L brackets that were on there. So you're going to use the original hardware and these L brackets. So you'll put the receiver up to the frame first, and then you'll put these L brackets back on the frame and just sandwich the hitch receiver right in between. Now these L brackets from the original receiver do have these locating pins that go up through the frame. So just make sure you align those properly as you get them put into position. So we're going to grab our 17mm socket and we're going to go ahead and tighten these bolts all the way down. Now those factory bolts are pretty large size. Those can get tightened. If you want to torque them and actually check torque, they'll go to about 80 foot-pounds and that'll be fine for those. Okay, so now that we've completely prepped the truck to get the bumper installed, we're going to go ahead and show you guys how to bolt on the bumper side pieces right to the bumper center section here. So like I said earlier in our video, we said this one we're working on today is our sloped single tube side. So this one is built with two 5/16 studs welded into the tube side here, and then a couple of 3/8 nuts welded to the plate there. So you're going to go ahead and align this up with your bumper center. We can put the 5/16 studs through the bottom and then just kind of line it up to the top here, and we're going to take 3/8 flange bolt with a flat washer. We're going to go ahead and thread those into our weld nuts that are in this tube side here. Okay, so I got both of my 3/8 bolts started in the holes there. I'm going to thread them in a little bit farther. Not quite enough to tighten them, just enough to hold that side piece a little better. Next we're going to come around and put the 5/16 nuts on the inside of the bumper here. So we're going to use 5/16 flat washer and then the 5/16 flange nut, and go ahead and get those both put on. So we have all of our hardware started in there now. Our 5/16 flange nuts are finger tight on the inside down there. Now this side tube is going to have just a little bit of adjustment just because of the size of the holes. This will be able to move up and down a little bit. Basically what we do is we just hold it in a spot where all these edges line up nicely and then tighten your hardware all the way. But if you do need to make a slight adjustment while the bumper's on the truck, you can get in there and loosen that hardware a little bit and tilt that side up or down a little bit if you'd like to adjust it to the cut on the back of your truck. Okay, so we are ready to put the bumper onto the truck. So we're going to use all of the factory hardware that mounted the original bumper and hitch receiver, these large bolts here that we used the 17mm socket for. We're also going to add these provided 1/2" grade 8 flat washers to these bolts, so you want to put one of those on every one of these bolts, and then we can go ahead and slide the bumper on the truck and get all these started. All right, so we're going to go ahead and slide the bumper on. We need to make sure that we get the receiver tube in the center of the bumper first so it'll slide on properly. Then you can go ahead and get a couple bolts started on each side. You can proceed with threading in all of your bolts. Go ahead and get them threaded in most of the way, just kind of hand tight, and then we'll get it adjusted after that. So we went ahead and started to get our bumper adjusted on the truck. What I did to start out with, I adjusted the bumper front to back on the slotted holes here, basically right in the middle of the slot. And I tightened this center bolt here, got a little bit of pressure on it with the impact. So the bumper is in the center, front to back, and I rotated it so that it lines up nicely with an even gap here. Now I'm going to go to the other side and get that one about in the same position. So I'm going to move the bumper right to the middle of the slots, front to back, and then tighten this center one here. So once you have a little bit of pressure on that, then you can adjust the rotation of the bumper to get it lined up, a nice even gap here. So right now we need to push up on the front here, and I'm going to tighten a couple more bolts, see if that'll hold it in place for us. So we have just a slightly bigger gap here than here. It's really close. What we can also do is loosen the hardware where the side bolts onto the center of the bumper, and we can usually get just a little bit of adjustment out of that area too. So if you need to make some changes there, get your gap nice and even and tighten down this hardware again here. Once everything looks symmetrical and fits nicely, then you can go ahead and tighten all 5 bolts on both sides, and those can get tightened down to 85 foot-pounds. Next, we're going to go ahead and get the bumper side support brackets installed. So there's going to be a pair of those that come with the bumper, and they are side specific, so we'll make sure and show you guys real quick how to tell the differences. Those are going to come with all 3/8 hardware to install them, all grade 8, 3/8 by 1 bolts, 3/8 flat washers, lock washers, and grade 8 nuts. So when you go to put these on the rear of the truck and figure out which side is which, you're going to want to take these slotted mounting holes that are on this plate here and face them towards the front of the truck. And once you hold that leg up there, you want to put this mounting tab forward of this one on the bumper, and you can tell that one lines up pretty nice. So that one is definitely our driver's side. If you put the other one in there, it would fit completely wrong. We'll go ahead and show you the difference just so you can tell. Now if we want to take this one and put our bolts forward, you can already see that it's going to be upside down and it won't line up properly. So as long as your mounting plate, mounting holes here are facing the front of the truck and you're lined up here, that's the correct one. So to get started, we're going to go ahead and take our driver's side mounting leg up and put it up to the frame, and then we're going to take a couple of the 3/8 bolts, put them through the holes just to hold this bracket in place, and then we'll be able to mark the frame so we know where to drill holes. I'm just going to install those tight enough to hold it for now. Alright, so now I have a paint pen, or you can use a permanent marker, whichever works for you, and we want to take this mounting leg here, we want to hold it up to where it sits nice and flush along the top and the bottom of the frame rail, and then we're just going to mark the center of these slotted holes right there. And then we can take this leg off, and then we'll drill 3/8 holes through the frame right where you marked the holes. So I'm just about to get ready to start drilling here with my 3/8 drill bit. Just one thing to check, always check on the back side of the frame, make sure there's nothing in the way that you're going to drill through. There is a wiring harness here, but it's up high enough that we shouldn't come in contact with it. So you always want to watch out for that stuff before you start drilling. So we're going to go ahead and get our support leg installed here. We'll hold that right up to the frame. I'm going to put one of the 3/8 bolts of the flat washer there just to hold that end up in the frame. Then we can install flat washer, lock washer, and then the regular nut on the back side. So you can go ahead and get all of your 3/8 bolts, all the hardware and everything put in the frame and the bumper, and then we'll get that adjusted and tightened down. So we've got all of our 3/8 hardware installed on our bumper support leg here. Everything's tightened down, so you just want to make sure that you adjust everything properly so that when you tighten the bolts and stuff, it doesn't try to pull down on the bumper or twist it in a weird spot. Essentially, you just want to make sure that after this leg is tightened down, it's maintaining your even reveal and everything is how you want it to be to look right. And you can make some adjustments with that as well. So these holes do have quite a bit of large slotted movement in them, so if you need to push up on the bumper and hold it up a little higher and want it to stay there, usually you can have someone lift up on it and then you can tighten this hardware and that support leg will hold it in place. So we have everything completely bolted up on our bumper, all the hardware is tightened down, so we're just about finished. A couple little details we need to do here. So we have our trailer connection plug here that we need to install in the bumper and get it plugged back in. So we want to take this original wiring harness and connector and run it over the top of the receiver hitch here. And then we're going to take our plug, put it right up through this bracket here, and plug in the harness at the same time. So once you get that in, these little metal clips will just clip right into the bracket on the bumper. And the last couple things is just some wiring that needs to be done. So if you installed aftermarket reverse lights in your bumper, you'll need to wire those up however you'd like to, whether you want them to go to a switch on a full wiring harness, or you can wire them directly into the tail lights, the original reverse light wiring, so that they turn on when you put the vehicle in reverse. The other thing that needs to be wired is our license plate light. So there's a couple options for that. If you retained the wiring harness that went inside the bumper, you can use that harness and splice in these wires right to the 2 wires that went to your original license plate light. Otherwise, if you did not keep that wiring harness like us, we didn't reuse it because there's nothing else that you really need it for. We have another truck we can show you real quick. We wired that one into a couple wires in the back of the tail light, and that's how we run our license plate light. So we've got the tail light pulled out of our company Tacoma here. We're just going to show you where we wired up our license plate light. So we extended the wires and ran them up through the bottom of the truck, and then we connected to this 3-wire triangle plug here that goes into the back of the tail light, and we ran our ground wire into the white with black stripe and our power wire into this green one here. So when you're running your license plate light wires to get those connected, we like to run them right through this little opening in the back here, so you can put them through the bumper right there, and then run your wires around to the inside to the taillight or the wiring harness, wherever you want them to go. Just make sure that you leave enough slack in this wire here so that when you flip your license plate up and down to access your hitch receiver, you've got enough wire there so that it'll move with it. All right, in this next segment, we're going to show you guys how to properly measure and cut your bedside if you ordered the rear bumper with the plate side option or the double tube straight tube option on the back. Now, our previous section we already cut for the sloped tube. That's going to be a different cut. Again, to repeat, this one is only for the straight cut for the plate side or the double tube side. All right, so the first measurement we're going to take is right at the bottom edge of this top plastic here. We're going to go straight down, kind of curve the tape measure around the curve of the body. We're going to go 22¼ inches. So we usually like to put a piece of masking tape on the body first, just to make your mark on there so that the mark isn't on the paint. So 22¼ for that one. And then the next one, we're going to come over, we're going to measure from the same area right against this plastic top cap here, and we're going to go straight down right to where it meets the edge of the fender flare here. And we want that one to be 22 3/8 of an inch. So now when you're measuring these, you want to make sure you have your tape measure nice and perpendicular to the top of the bed here. Make sure it's not crooked or, angled at all, because that can make your measurement incorrect. All right, so we have both of those marks on there, and then we took a piece of 1/2 inch wide masking tape and just connected our marks straight across with a nice even straight line with the masking tape. That's going to represent our cut line along the top there. Always put arrows on the tape also, just to signify which side you need to cut on so you don't make a mistake there. Around the back here, we need to come around the corner and continue to cut on the top of this and straight down on the inside of this little curve here. Now, when we come over to the fender flare area, some of you might have your flares cut back pretty far already. If you don't, and you're not planning on cutting your flares, you'll just want to continue that straight line all the way around the corner and back through the flare and through the inner plastic fender liner here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and use a 4.5 inch angle grinder to cut through the bedside here. I'm going to start on the inside of the fender and work my way that way, just so that I'm going with the direction that the grinder is spinning. So now I've switched over to a sanding disc, and I'm going to go in and clean up the rough edges here. If there's any uneven spots, just kind of smooth those out, and also get rid of the sharp edges on the back of the sheet metal. That definitely, you want to make sure you get rid of those because those are very sharp and can easily cut your hands and stuff. Okay, so I have this side all completely cut and trimmed, cleaned up all the sharp edges on the back there. You're going to want to do the exact same procedure on the other side of the truck, same measurements, cut it the same over there as well. Just to finish up, you want to make sure that you paint the edge of that sheet metal on the bottom, otherwise it is going to rust very quickly. You can apply rubber edge trim to the bottom if you wish to. That's more of a personal preference. We don't do it just because it tends to hold dirt and water in there, and it can also continue to cause the sheet metal to rust. But if you prefer that look, you can add that as well. Once all that's done, your cutting and everything is complete, and you're ready to go ahead and put your bumper on the truck. So if you ordered the plate side with your Rock Runner Series rear bumper, we're going to show you which hardware you need to install that right now. It's going to come with 3/8 carriage bolts, 1 inch long. You'll need 4 for each side, 4 3/8 flat washers, and 4 3/8 flange nuts. So the first thing we're going to do, take one of our carriage bolts, put it through the bottom of our plate side here, up through that square hole, and then lift it up into the bumper center right here. Then we're going to put a 3/8 flat washer and then a 3/8 flange nut on the inside here. And now I'm going to take another one of the 3/8 carriage bolts, put it in from the bumper side, and then we'll put another flat washer and flange nut on the back side. You can go ahead and repeat the process for the other 2 remaining holes. So we have all the hardware just basically all finger tight, enough to hold this up in position. You can see there's a little bit of movement there in that side plate. What we want to do to make sure it's aligned properly is essentially line up this flange here with the surface of that and make sure we have a nice even reveal, and then tighten down our hardware and make sure it locks in place there. So once you have a pretty even reveal all the way down there, you can go ahead and tighten down the rest of the hardware. You want to maybe take a step back and just look at, when you get both of your plate sides in position, look across the top of the bumper or even flip it over on the table or the floor and make sure that those side plates are not uneven on the bumper or twisted. You want them to be right on the same plane, nice and level. Now that those are tightened up, once you go to put the bumper on the truck, since you can see there was a little bit of adjustment there, you can loosen this hardware slightly and adjust that side wing if you need to line up with your cut. But in order to do that, you will probably have to take the bumper back off the truck because you won't be able to access the hardware once it's on there. All right, next we're going to show you guys how to install the double tube side onto the Rock Runner Series center, bumper center here. So this one has the 2 5/16 studs welded into it and 2 3/8 nuts welded into the top. So first of all, we're going to take these studs and line them up through the holes in the bottom. Then we're going to take 5/16 flat washer and 5/16 flange nut and get those started on the inside here. Then up top we're going to take 3/8 by 1 flange bolt and a 3/8 flat washer, and those are going to thread right into our weld nuts here. So we have the hardware almost tightened down, but not quite all the way yet. You can see there's a little bit of play in that side tube there. Essentially we want to make sure that we get the surfaces of these two plates lined up really nice and evenly. Then you can go ahead and tighten down your hardware the rest of the way.